It was the kind of day where the courthouse itself seemed to lean forward, as though the walls and rafters were eager to listen in on what was about to happen. The building was old, built when architects believed justice deserved marble columns, wide stone steps, and ceilings so high they could make a liar feel small. Sunlight streamed in through the tall windows, dust motes dancing in the air like they too were waiting for the gavel to strike. By 8:30 a.m., the benches in the gallery were full. Reporters with notepads and cameras, locals clutching coffee in paper cups, a few activists in Justice for All t-shirts, and curious faces who had simply wandered in after hearing whispers of the trial that had gripped the city for weeks. In the front row sat Mr. Rivera, his weathered hands folded tightly in his lap, next to Jalen, the teenager whose life had been turned upside down one ordinary Thursday night. Both avoided looking at the defense table, where Officer Daniel Harkins sat in full uniform, his badge gleaming like a coin under a spotlight. Daniel didn't look nervous. He never did. His posture was rigid, chin slightly raised, a faint smirk ghosting the corners of his mouth as if this was all a minor inconvenience, an irritating formality before he could get back to his real work. He had been on the force for nearly 15 years, the kind of officer who knew which rules could be bent and which could be broken if no one was watching too closely. His file was thick with commendations and letters of thanks from local business owners and neighborhood leaders, but buried deeper were the complaints, the ones that couldn't be substantiated, the ones that mysteriously disappeared after internal reviews. Across from him stood attorney Michelle Carter, a woman who had built her career on cases everyone else said were impossible to win. She wasn't tall, she didn't shout, and she never tried to charm a jury. Instead, she had a way of speaking that made people lean in, as though every word was a stone in the foundation of something unshakable. She had spent months combing through reports, body cam footage, and witness statements, piecing together a puzzle that painted a very different picture of Daniel Harkins than the one on his award plaques. She hadn't come for a spectacle. She came for accountability. When the judge entered, a silver-haired man named Harold Grant, whose calm voice could silence even the rowdiest gallery, the room stood. The bailiff called the court to order, and Michelle took her place at the podium for opening statements. "This case," she began, her voice steady but carrying to every corner of the room, "is not about hating the police. It's not about turning our backs on those who protect us. It's about the promises made when someone pins this badge," she pointed toward Daniel without looking at him, "over their heart. It's about what happens when those promises are broken, not by mistake, not in the heat of danger, but by choice." The jurors were already leaning forward. Some of them scribbled notes, others simply stared at her. She spoke of Mr. Rivera's store, the unlawful search, the missing cash. She told them about Jalen's arrest, the smashed phone, the fear that lingered long after the cuffs came off. She didn't embellish. She didn't need to. The truth was heavy enough. The defense attorney, a sharp-suited man named Richard Lowell, countered with his own opening. "Ladies and gentlemen, policing is not a perfect science. It is done in real time, with incomplete information, under the constant threat of danger. Officer Harkins has served this community with honor. He has put his life on the line more times than you can count. Mistakes happen, misunderstandings happen, but that does not make a man a criminal." His words were smooth, but Michelle noticed a flicker of unease in his eyes. Over the next week, the courtroom became a stage for a story that swung between anger, disbelief, and quiet heartbreak. Mr. Rivera took the stand first.
his voice trembling as he recounted how Daniel had barged into his store, citing a vague tip about stolen goods. "He told me to stand back," Rivera said, wringing his hands. "He looked through everything, every shelf, every box in the storeroom. Things broke. My register, my money, it was gone after he left. I called the station, but—" His voice faltered. Michelle placed a comforting hand on the rail before asking him to describe the money that was missing. It wasn't much, just under $400, but to Rivera, it meant the difference between paying rent and falling behind. Jalen followed, his long frame awkward in the witness chair. "I was walking home from practice," he said, glancing briefly at the jury. "Next thing I know, there's a car pulling up. He," Jalen nodded toward Daniel, "gets out and says I match a description. I asked, 'What description?' He didn't answer, just told me to turn around and put my hands behind my back." His voice caught slightly when he described his sister running up with her phone. "She was scared for me. She started recording, and then he knocked it out of her hand." Michelle asked if he'd been told the reason for his arrest. "No, ma'am," he said, his eyes fixed on the floor. The prosecution's case grew tighter with each witness, a digital forensics expert explaining how Daniel's body cam conveniently malfunctioned during every incident in question. A fellow officer reluctantly admitting that Harkins had a reputation for pushing boundaries when he thought no one was watching. Michelle's cross-examinations were precise, almost surgical. She never raised her voice, never rushed. She let silence hang until it felt heavy enough to press the truth out of whoever was on the stand. Then came the dash cam video, the one the defense had tried desperately to keep out of court. Grainy footage from another patrol car showing Daniel leaning over a handcuffed man. There was no audio, but the man visibly flinched at whatever Daniel said. Then Daniel glanced straight into the camera, smirked, and walked away. The jury's reaction was palpable. Some shifted uncomfortably, others stared harder. When it was the defense's turn, they brought out character witnesses, the pastor of Daniel's church, a retired police captain, even a single mother who claimed Daniel had once saved her son's life. These stories painted him as a hero, a man under impossible pressure. But when Michelle cross-examined, she never attacked their sincerity. She simply highlighted the gaps, the incidents they didn't know about, the evidence they hadn't seen. The trial stretched on, each day pulling more people into its orbit. Outside, news vans lined the street. Social media was ablaze with hashtags like "No One Untouchable" and "Justice for Maple Ave." Inside, the jury watched, listened, and weighed. In her closing argument, Michelle didn't pace or gesture wildly. She simply stood close to the jury box and said, "This badge is not a shield from the law. It is a promise to uphold it. I am not asking you to punish a man for being human. I am asking you to hold him accountable for breaking the trust he swore to protect." The jury deliberated for just 6 hours. When they returned, the foreman's voice was steady. Guilty on all counts. The room erupted, some in relief, others in outrage. Daniel sat frozen, the smirk gone, replaced by a hollow stare. Michelle exhaled slowly, her expression unreadable. Outside, under the fading afternoon sun, she told reporters, "This isn't about one man. This is about the message we send that no one, no matter their position, is above the law." Mr. Rivera stood beside her, tears in his eyes. Jalen's sister hugged her brother tightly. As the crowd dispersed, Michelle walked down the courthouse steps alone, the weight of the case still heavy on her shoulders. She knew this victory wouldn't fix the system overnight, but for one day, in one courtroom, the truth had stood taller than the badge.